Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. Thank you for joining us. Today, we're with FIU MFA alumnus, artist, and curator Cole Miller. My name is Colette Mella. Welcome to Miami Beach Urban Studios Live Art Talk. I'd like to give a very special thank you to our sponsor, the City of Miami Beach Department of Tourism and Office of Cultural Affairs, for making these art talks possible. Cole Miller is a multimedia artist, educator, and curator based in Sumter, South Carolina. He works in fibers, ceramics, and mixed media installations that explore translations of culture and interactions among peoples across time and place by interrogating the enduring aftermath of historical circumstance, material, history, and the fluid instability of meaning. As an exhibiting artist, Miller's works in fiber and ceramics have been shown nationally in such spaces as ArtFields in South Carolina, the Bakehouse Art Complex here in Miami, the 1310 Gallery in Fort Lauderdale, and here at Miami Beach Urban Studios in the Fellows Gallery. In fact, the first exhibition that I curated, co-curated, was with my cohort, Brittany Wigner, was Cole's exhibition, Illuminations. His work has been featured in several publications and resides in various private and public collections, such as the Frost Art Museum. Cole received his Master's of Fine Art from Florida International University and is a curator at the Sumter County Gallery of Art in South Carolina. Hi, Cole. It is so great to see you. It has been a while. You look fantastic.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's great to see you again. And just this whole process has been such a great journey. So thank you so much for including me. I'm really happy to be here and sharing with everybody.
We love having you. So it's been, I think you exhibited here in 2015, maybe? Has it been that long?
I think, it seems like the world has hit an oil slick and I have no judge of what time has passed. It feels like yesterday, but you're right. I think it has been about like 5 or 6 years, which I can hardly believe.
Yes, it has. So I'm going to go ahead and hand the screen over to you.
Okay. All right.
Oh, tell us where you are.
Sure, I would love to. So right now I'm coming to you from sort of my office / studio space. I'm really lucky. I'll go into it maybe a bit more in the presentation, but the job that I got here came with a studio space. So I'm able to work creatively, also curatorially, and sort of jump back and forth. So that's been a really, I think, nurturing experience and something that I've been able to learn from and grow a lot from, I think. So right now I'm in my office in Sumter, South Carolina. Here at our gallery, which is in a larger cultural center complex. But that's it. That's where I am this evening.
And you're what, like an hour and a half from Charlotte? Is that what you told me?
Oh, yes, sorry. No, that's for me, Sumter, yes. So Sumter, South Carolina, it's kind of a smaller rural community. We have a large Air Force base, I think, which is the bulk of our population here. But it's very much a smaller rural southern town, exactly. Probably an hour from Columbia, 2 hours from Charlotte, about an hour and a half from Charleston, about 4 hours from Atlanta.
Okay.
And so shall I go ahead and share the...
Yeah, go right ahead. Sure.
All right. All right, so it's is that looking good for you on your end there?
It looks perfect.
All right, great. So yeah, thank you again so much for having me. I'm really excited to be doing this. I feel like it's almost been a while since I've had the opportunity to present old work, new work, and just to speak about what I've been doing professionally, creatively. So I'm really happy to be here tonight. So I really wanted to start with my older bodies of work. And so this piece, or this project that I'll be speaking on, is my MFA thesis project, referred to as Archipelago. Also, I've shown it under the name Hydrography. And it's an ongoing project that started in about 2014. I've included some quotes here that I think are pretty intrinsic to understanding not just this body of work, but sort of all the work that I do, speaking to my experiences, having grown up abroad in the Bahamas till I was about 14 years old, moving to the United States in 2001, and living in South Florida and eventually here in South Carolina in the southern United States. And just those experiences of cultural hybridization, these contact zones, which Mary Louise Pratt describes as these social spaces where disparate cultures clash, grapple with each other, often in highly asymmetrical relations of domination and subordination. So always very interested in that power play within cultural translations and history. And so one of the first exhibitions in which I was able to present this work was my MFA thesis show. And actually this is at MBUS, kind of just as you go in the main doors, if you hang a quick left, it was on the wall there. And so these are basically all antique quilt remnants that I was able to find either in junk stores, online, and then they've been over-dyed with indigo. I love the natural material. Also, it's a really loaded material historically with its own sort of transnational identity. So I was working with a lot of found fabrics, pieces, remnants, essentially fragments of sort of former quilts, and sort of pinning those together very loosely to just be able to, it was never the idea to leave them pinned. I was going to fix them, but conceptually, I loved the idea of them being unfixed, never really ever finished. And so it was then able to pivot and change anytime I showed this project in the future. It could grow, shrink, change size and shape to fit wherever the space was where I would be presenting the work. It's also been backlit with fluorescent lighting. Here it was working on a timer, so the viewers were invited to press the button down at the bottom. The lights would turn on for about 100 seconds, which I love because it enables the viewer to really see just how sort of threadbare, decrepit, falling apart these pieces of quilts really are. I love the sort of memorializing content there. I can't throw things like this away. I love them. It means so much to me. My mother was a huge quilter when I was growing up. A lot of the women in my family have, I've got their quilts in my home. I live with them. And so it was something that I feel really strongly connected to, a material history that I just think is so resonant now and shares so much of our own lived experience in history. So I wanted to work with those materials. Here's another installation of that project. This was probably about 14 feet wide by about 12 feet high. This was in the Bakehouse in Miami. So if you're familiar, it was for a while there, it was the FIU Project Space Room. I did the residency there after grad school, which culminated in an exhibition. And so this work was included in that show. And instead of being backlit here, it's actually set in front of windows. So you get a sunlight. And then in the evening at nighttime, you get these city lights of Miami sort of filtering through and creating, I hope, the same effect that the fluorescents were doing in the other piece. And then this is the most recent installation. This one is probably about 13 feet across by about 9 feet tall. And this is in Lake City, South Carolina for ArtFields in 2017, where I was completely blown away and just could not believe that I was awarded the installation category prize for this piece. It's a huge art event drawing creators, artists, all sorts from the entire Southeast region. They do it every year. Hundreds of artists are included in this exhibition. So really to be singled out from there, I could not, I was shocked. In fact, I left early the night of the awards. I thought, what's my chance? And then I got a text followed by a check a few days later. So that was great. So, and just because I've shown this work, this is what I wrote my thesis on. And I'm also terrified I'm going to forget something. I wanted to read just a brief statement. I'm going to try and make it look like I'm not reading. But anyway, so
okay, if you read, that's fine.
Okay, I'll try to look up every now and then, make it seem very natural. Antique quilt remnants crafted by unknown makers in various states of deterioration with threadbare fabric shedding at their seams, leaking their cotton batting. Fractions and fragments of their former embodiments, the faded and stained cloth contains an archive unto itself. In a gesture that is once a calculated attempt at erasure and willful resistance to such a process, the quilts are repeatedly over-dyed with indigo in an act of accumulation upon the object's surface. Multiple immersions into the dye vat translate the calico patchworks into a field of activated blue surface. All that remains of the original object are the colored fabrics darker than the indigo, the texture of the quilt's surface revealing a topographic patchwork, and lines of stitching charting an aquatic non-space marked by an archipelago of rips, tears, and fissures between and among the quilts. Despite the fractured quilt remnants being pieced together into a larger cartography, they exist only as such temporarily. Held together loosely with pins, the whole rests in a solid but transient state, never permanently fixed, unfinished, and overworn. So that kind of sums up what I was thinking a lot about when creating this body of work. But also I wanted to include some of my inspirations, influences behind this. I mentioned my family history with quilting, but also just a larger history of the medium in general. So this is a work by Harriet Powers up here. I love her narrative quilts, dating back to the 19th century, and just the quilt making, quilt design as a site of cross-cultural pollination. You have specifically in areas of the United States, in the South, an African approach to textile design, as well as a European design for textiles, the techniques of improvisation, finding materials, and then the function of the quilts to be narrative, to be decorative. All of that really fits into things that just intrigue me so much about the medium. I also really love art history and the paintings of the Romantic Sublime sort of landscape painters, people like Turner or Caspar David Friedrich, these very atmospheric, gauzy, almost large modeled color fields, essentially. So something like David Friedrich's Monk by the Sea really speaks to my interest in utilizing these large spaces of blue color on the quilts. And so another project that I created in 2014, sort of while the other work was going on, but almost as like somewhere to just get out and get away from all of that thinking, we had the opportunity to do an exhibition, a group exhibition of our MFA class at Space Mountain, which, you know, I don't know if that's still there, but it was a really great space. And so this was kind of a filmed performance. I really love the work of Now Bustamante and her, what she refers to as a filmformance, which is like this sort of filmed, videoed, produced version of a performance. I also really love, even going back as far as like the 60s, like Bruce Naumann's studio videos, where he would just kind of walk in various lines or shapes around his studio. I created this as a durational performance in my grad studio. And so for this, I'm actually spinning cosmetic cotton balls that I prepared using these antique comb carders. And then a power drill that I had outfitted with, rather than a drill bit, I was using a spinning wheel spindle. And so it lasted, the whole video was probably about 4 hours long. I just basically did it till I felt like my hands were gonna fall off. And then that supplemented the installation in the space with the rug that I used. Some of the tools were presented as well, as well as some of the cotton balls that I had used, some of the string and yarn and threads that I had made. But I have a brief clip just of what this video looked like. So basically just a sort of a sharp spindle there, spinning really fast at the rate of the drill. I'm drafting out the cotton, and that tension between the movement of my arm and the speed of the drill rotating draws out the cotton into a thread that I then wind onto the spindle and then sort of keep going. And a little bit about just that process or the history behind that. I was really inspired by just the craft of the craft always has, I think, with it, specifically contemporary craft approaches to art making, I think always have an activist component. I think historically you see that across the fiber arts in craft. There's always been an activist component to that, a label or a layer of agency, I think, behind it, specifically economic agency. I was thinking a lot about, and I'm always inspired by the sort of proto-industrial cottage industry where working from the home was normalized. You would produce cotton thread, yarn, wool, all these different products would then be made in the home and then moved outside of the home for larger production. So I have here sort of an illustration of that period appropriate to the 18th century, 1700s of a woman spinning in home, juxtaposed with sort of an industrialized setting of these children working in extremely dangerous factories, sort of producing the same sort of thing, essentially, garments, textiles. I was also really thinking a lot about, and I feel like you can't get away from it, especially when you're working with charka spindles, and a history of British imperialism and also resistance to that imperialism. So I was really inspired. Gandhi was a huge proponent of what he called homespun, which was making your own yarn, weaving your own fabric in the home as a method of resisting British imperialism and colonialism, and just working towards self-sufficiency. So that, again, that component, that activist side of the work is something that really drew me in. And then I wanted to include just an actual charka spinning wheel, which is, you can see here, and then a detail on the spindle. So basically I just removed that spindle bit because I did have a charka wheel, which promptly broke because I didn't know what I was doing. And so I was able to salvage at least the bit and then utilize that for the performance. Oh, and I've got another statement about this one because I've like applied to performance festivals with it. Although I've never performed this live, and I would absolutely love to. I really just I feel like this sums it up, what I'm interested in, what this project is doing for me. An electric power drill outfitted with a charka spindle instead of a drill bit becomes a hybridized invention, providing the mechanism for crafting cotton thread hand spun from store-bought cosmetic cotton balls that have been prepared using antique carding combs originally used in a 19th century proto-industrial setting. The tension created between the physical presence of the performing body juxtaposed against the historically loaded pasts of the materials, processes, and means of production. This project mediates the distant spaces between labor and consumption, economy and agency, culture and appropriation, and power and its many imbalances. So it's such an old piece. I was surprised to see that one come up on the flyer. So I thought, oh, I better talk about it. And I'm so glad I did, actually, because this is really a fun piece for me to work on.
And so Cole, you still do spinning?
I do, yes. In fact, I started spinning probably about 2012 or so, and I did not know what I was doing. I was using a drop spindle, making just little singles, so not actually plied yarn. And I was dyeing that and getting some interesting results and using it more for embroidery. You know, at the time had only ever lived in South Florida and the Bahamas, and so yarn, wool, knitwear was like not anywhere in my vocabulary. It's hot. I don't need to wear anything knitted. So I almost had nothing to do with the yarn. I just loved making it. And so I really wanted to find some outlets to start using that. I was making so much of it. It was such a fun process that I really realized, like, okay, something needs to happen with this. And so for moving forward, and these pieces started coming out probably, I think, 2016, after grad school, sort of processing, finding my own way creatively. And so the yarn really started to find its way back into the work, the spinning, in terms of being ties or woven bindings for quilts. So this is a piece entitled Chicxulub, after the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs. And it was done for an exhibition at the Museum of Contemporary Art in North Miami, and I think that was in summer of 2016. And so this features, again, my interest in quilt pieces and antique quilt remnants. I'm using these quilt stars here that are found, but they've been appliqued to an over-dyed bed sheet, but instead of indigo this time, I'm doing a stitch resist, a sort of a tie-dye using thin washes of oil paint, a little bit of acrylic as well, but then building up that color on the surface, creating an accumulation of pigment and of texture that would hopefully transform the original material, recontextualize it in a way. So originally, if you can see some of these dinosaurs, they were largely primary colors. The sheet was white. And I just kind of kept going, multiple immersions, multiple paintings, and sort of came out with something that I liked and then built on it from there. So then added the quilt stars, came in with the yarn to do these ties, which so usually quilts are sort of sewn together through the layers. Another way of doing that is just by running a quick thread through there and tying it off and cutting it. For for me, that's easy. I don't know. I feel like I'm a little lazy sometimes about it. But I also like that they come up from the surface. They sort of change the topography of the surface of the finished piece. And then I love these bats. It was I love bats. They, for me, represent these very hybridized creatures. They're like the only mammal that flies. They occupy these liminal spaces associated with dawn and dusk. They're a little creepy, a little like Halloween-y, which I sort of really like as well, this idea of marking a passage of time. So I really wanted to just kind of throw it all, a really very kitchen sink kind of piece, just sort of throw it all on there and work with these ideas of surface, of culture, of history, but also maybe more on an intimate scale, using the bed sheets, these domestic sort of artifacts. And I also created these clay buttons out of Egyptian paste. Again, very Halloween-y. They're ghosts and like tombstones and just made from candy molds. And then another piece that I created within that same kind of body of work or concept, I feel like these two are sort of, they were done close together, so they're sort of fairly related to me, is this piece, which I had some other name for it, but it's just, everybody calls it Merrill. It's the name that's embroidered on the top of the towel there. But basically this piece is made, again, from found fabrics, very much still drawing on my interest there. But also issues of agency, economic agency. Merrill, the shoposaurus, this idea of buying, commodification. So again, I'm back with the indigo here. But instead of a stitch resist or a tie-dye kind of approach, I'm also getting into batik stamping, which is basically just hot wax right onto the undyed fabric. And so here I've got these silhouettes of like witches on brooms. I'm not sure if that reads. I cut this stencil out myself. It was fun to kind of make this stamp and then apply it. And really it was done as tests, but I loved the fabric. When it was done, I ended up sewing a bunch of these test pieces together to create an overall quilt. But the metaphor, the symbol of the witch, sort of a throwback to the Halloween I was talking about in the other piece, is for me, it's again another metaphor for agency, for empowerment. It's very metaphorical in terms of being supernatural, but still to an extent, the ability to affect change, influence outcomes, determine your own self-worth, power, and agency. So I love just the witch as a symbol of that. So I wanted to include that here. And then I don't know if you can see it in this picture. I also, again, going back to the woven binding, these woven strips of yarn that I put together, spun them, wove them, dyed them. I also included a small zipper here. That's gonna be kind of almost a, I want to say like a Barnett Newman reference. I love his zip. Well, I don't love them. I think it's a little bit ridiculous. And I'm having fun with it. It's worth being played with. So yeah, a few details on this. Again, another tied quilt with these little almost pink, they kind of look like shrimp sometimes to me. Again, stitched through, cut, tied, and that holds all of these 3 layers together of the top, the batting, and the backing. And these works, and generally my outlook on quilting overall is inspired, again, by that history of activism within the craft. So particularly the Names Project, the AIDS Memorial Quilt. As somebody who was born in 1987 and grew up kind of at the tail end of, I don't want to say tail end of the AIDS crisis because it's not over. And as we're all living through a pandemic currently, I think, I hope we learn something from previous pandemics, which just because it's over for some people does not mean it is over for everybody.
It's still there, right? People are not aware that it's still around. Exactly.
Yes. And so living with the cultural legacy of the AIDS pandemic, growing up in the early 90s, also growing up as a gay child and being ultimately completely terrified by a lot of the PSAs, a lot of the stigma associated with AIDS, with the gay community. That was a lot of processing I personally had to do. And so this kind of relating to it, working with it in a way that doesn't scare me, but that I can embrace it, is something that I think has been really helpful to my artistic growth and just constantly inspires me. It's an ongoing project. I can't flip through catalogs of exhibitions of this work without breaking down. It's so touching. It's a constant source of inspiration for my work.
What size are these blocks that you put together here?
These here in the current slide?
Yeah.
So none of these are mine. These are all examples from
Okay,
the
that's
Names project.
influence. Okay.
Yes, yes. So, and there's so, I mean, at this point, I'm not even sure how many. It's just, it's ongoing. So many people are always contributing, but it never, I never get tired of seeing these works. They're always new and unique and still just so heartfelt.
Right. I know a couple artists that are still making the blocks for them down here in South Florida. Yeah.
And also very inspired, particularly with the interest in batiking, which we saw in one of the last pieces. Where I grew up in the Bahamas, there was very close to where I lived, a batik factory, which is called Androsia. It was established in the early 70s, 1973, and that actually coincides with the independence of the Bahamas from England, this decolonization movement. And again, touching on the idea of economic agency, providing jobs, having a craft-based economy. Again, it was something I saw everywhere growing up. It was always held in such high esteem, these really colorful, beautiful fabrics. I think that, I don't know, I like them. To me, it reminds me of home. I have a nostalgic gaze towards what I'm seeing. I think that there's an essentialist component as well. If you look at history of decolonization in the Caribbean and this really hard push towards formulating a national identity, particularly one that fits well with a paradise narrative about the Caribbean, particularly geared towards economic tourism and things like that. You know, so anyway, it's very complicated, I think, but constant source of inspiration for me. I love it. I think the vintage 70s caftans down here, I want one. But the stamping was a technique that I witnessed growing up and was something I replicated. So they actually use sea sponges that have been carved down into these shapes and then dipped in wax and then stamped on these, what you can see as these large, long bolts of cloth that are then dyed and then put out to dry before being made into garments, sold as fabric. But oh yeah, basically anybody in a hotel on Andros, anybody working in a restaurant will probably be wearing an Androsia shirt, as well as it's sort of the go-to souvenir piece for having visited the island. And then just artists that have inspired me for that body of work, or just in general. I really love Helen Frankenthaler and other color field painters, particularly people like Sam Gilliam and Al Loving, which are a little bit later, but I think all three of those artists really approach color with very much a textile sensibility. To me, it speaks to dyeing. A lot of these are unprimed canvases, particularly in the case of Al Loving's piece, literally, it's pieced, a bit like a quilt. So initially, I was like just dying when I saw that. I was like, I love it, a quilt. It's essentially a quilt. And just the materiality, the color, this, the ability to put the pigment not just on the canvas, but make it a part of the surface that you're seeing. That really, again, it's dying, and I love that. And then Barnett Newman, which I've already had a go at him. Can't stop. Also, I really was influenced by, and I know they're very popular, it seems like now, I don't want to say I liked them before they were famous. I feel like they've always been famous, but now they're everywhere, which is great because I didn't know when I was going to get to France in the 70s, but they're at the Miami Beach Convention Center anymore. The support surface artists from the 70s in France, particularly Claude Viala, Patrick Seytour. I love the way that they use these found objects, or these appropriated objects, appropriated materials, the replication of these shapes and forms. And again, that interest in creating surface, that really speaks to me, particularly with the body of works that I've been putting together. And then kind of shifting, in 2016, I also got a tip about a call for artists for an exhibition in San Francisco at a really interesting community-based space called Root Division. And it was a guest curator putting a show together about queer gods, or any kind of queerness in mythology. So it was really wide open and just research-based. And so I put together, the application required you to create a zine page because there was going to be a published zine catalog. So I've included the page here actually because it sort of, for me, functions like a visual artist statement. Just kind of running down my thought process, the the decisions I made. I love this use of the blue boy. He's, to me, just this great little character that as like a gay person, I've absolutely felt attached to growing up. He's just so effeminate and youthful, and the fabrics are just lush and fabulous. And again, it's not just me, it's definitely a canon of references. He's been sort of invoked by gay artists in queer works throughout definitely the 20th century and continuing. So I really wanted to play on that. And also the idea of this kind of cross-cultural hybridity. So I'm interested in this figure of Saint Sebastian, again, another sort of historically gay iconic character, always pierced with arrows, sort of in a state of physical sort of ecstasy, as we do see with saints' martyrdoms in throughout art history, but also that piercing you see in other figures in other cultures, like the Nkondi figurines from West Africa, from the Congo, which are struck with nails as a way of invoking the power sort of housed within the figure. So that, to me, again, power, agency, really was something that, and I think the ability to shift meaning and shift understanding across time and place and various peoples was something that drew me to creating this work, to following this path. I've also included what's called a chick Charney, which again, drawing on my history growing up in the Bahamas, it's a mythological sort of cryptid creature, kind of like a giant owl that runs around causing trouble, sort of the archetypal trickster. And so it's another hybrid form of a human-bodied, owl-headed creature, just again lost to mythology, and that really spoke to me and was something I wanted to explore, get into. And so I created the work that you see here. This figurine is probably about 20 inches tall. It's got an owl head. All of these are done out of found objects that were cast in silicone and then reproduced in clay, different clay bodies, and then pierced with shards of ceramic, with nails, embedded with salt. And that was the final piece that went over to San Francisco. And actually, I showed that again in Miami, and it sold. I was so thrilled. And another project that was sort of within that same concept was, and the other, it's called, I sort of refer to it loosely as the Blue Boys or Kobold, which kobold is the German word for ghost, but it also comes from cobalt, like a cobalt carbonate, which is the sort of substance that I use in the clay to be this blue colorant, and has that historic association with ceramics in China, like flow blue from the 1700s in Europe, the blue and white china that's really sort of iconic and prized. It's the same material. And so playing more on this idea of these ghosts, I love making the little figurines. A lot of those were done as tests for the original, for the larger piece. But I had so many of them, I just found that I love tucking them into shows, hiding them around little pieces. Again, working with the idea of a ghost, of a space being haunted by its own past in a way. So that was something I was really excited to play with. And then in 2016, I felt like it was really nice. This is like summer of 2016. Really was like the culmination of a lot of those previous bodies of works. I had a lot of very, very generous offers to exhibit. I was in a show at David Castillo Gallery, curated by Danielle Damas, Handmade Rituals, with another FIU alum, Yasmin Khalaf. And that was like a dream come true for me, to be able to show work in that space. I also was very lucky to receive a commission from the Bass Museum to create the Archipelago project in their Walgreens windows space. And so just having these opportunities to essentially function as a working artist was, for me, kind of like living the dream in a way, and also just great real-time experience. And then also in summer of 2016, I received a very generous offer to become the curator and assistant director at the Sumter County Gallery of Art in Sumter, South Carolina. So it'd been about a year and a half out of grad school. I've been doing a lot of adjunct teaching. I'd also been working as an artist assistant, as a conservation technician. And so when this came through, I was so excited to have a space to, I think, explore in a curatorial capacity a lot of the ideas and inspirations that I have had sort of swirling around creatively. I love, of course, my interest in craft, my interest in Caribbean art history, African diaspora art history, which I was able to sort of really delve into at FIU, I'm now able to have a real location in which to explore some of those ideas curatorially. And so this is kind of just going to be a best of greatest hits of some of my favorite shows or the artists that I've just loved working with. Like, so we've got an exterior picture here on the right, and on the left is actually an installation by, or an exhibition of work by Jiha Moon, really fantastic artist who actually I originally saw her work in Miami at Mindy Solomon. She teaches at Georgia State University now. And so just the opportunity to work with someone who has been so influential on me and whose work I love, I can't believe she said yes, and it was a great experience. So other artists, Sabotage from Raleigh-Durham Chapel Hill area, William Paul Thomas, installations by Jonathan Brilliant, as well as we have an emerging artists series that we do in our hall gallery. This is Dogon Kriga, along with other exhibitions by Andrew Blanchard, Cedric Amoja, and then of course Lorna Ruth Galloway, who very kindly exhibited with us back in 2018. That was an amazing experience. I'm so glad that she had a space to just explore some of these ideas. I love her wheat paste installations. We had 2 floating walls. And I was just so excited to help her put that work up. It could have been only the wheat paste walls, and that show would have been amazing, but she has so much great work.
We have her work up now too, Cole, and we're getting so many wonderful compliments. It's so great. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's coming down soon, I'm sad to say, but yeah.
I've got 3, actually, you can't, they're just behind my computer here. So, oh yes, I see it every day. I love her work so much. And she was actually in a, so the format for our gallery is we have 2 formal exhibition galleries. And so what we like to do is these tandem exhibitions of sort of to put them together, but still have separate solo single artist exhibitions that really just work well together. So Lorna's exhibition was in tandem with Atlanta artist Shaniqua Gay, who came into the space. And again, like Lorna, she did an installation where she created a mural on this like 54-foot long back wall of the gallery, where she basically designed this toile that features the faces of Black women that had been killed by the police. So Sandra Bland is in there. I think there are 4 different women at the time that she was working with. And she also created the textiles that you see there in the draped skirts. They're all printed with her own designs. She also does amazing paintings. We've had other artists that we've had, Angela Davis Johnson, Miko Michi from Atlanta, Stephen Chesley from here in South Carolina. And so for us, I feel, or at least for me, the idea is to present art and artists and programming that I think reflect the diversity of our community here in Sumter where we live, but also to make accessible for our community work by artists who wouldn't necessarily have a show in a town like this. They're working in Atlanta, they're working in Charlotte. We've gone as far as DC, but really we focus on the entire Southeast region. So usually looking for artists with a regional affiliation, but very much a national reputation in terms of exhibitions. So Craig Crawford, Susan Klein was so much fun, Maria Britton. In fact, Maria Britton was our lockdown show. She got extended all the way through July because we had opened that like February of last year. And then about 2 weeks into the show, we had to shut down for 3 months. But she was so fantastic to work with. And again, that's another one whose work I saw in Florida, actually. I think it was in Plantation. She had a piece in a group show there. Turns out she's like 2 hours away from me here. So it was great just to work with her. And then, I feel like I haven't said enough about just the curatorial side of things. I feel like you could probably see from the work, my interest in fibers and textiles is very much at the forefront of a lot of these exhibitions. But also I think just the ability to present art and artists by people who would never be known or never seen in a place like this. The gallery is housed within a larger cultural center complex. Originally it was a high school built in the 1930s. And since then has been transformed. So we have a performing arts space, we have a black box theater, and it really feels like the cultural hub of the community. There's really amazing creative individuals who are very dedicated to the spaces here and to their functioning. And so that's just such an encouraging group of people to work with. It has felt a bit at a loss lately with all the shutdowns, with COVID, having been closed. You know, unfortunately, like the theater, those productions have had to go on hiatus. They can't be performed until it's safe, you know, for most people, if not everybody, to be back in there. But, you know, we've just, again, trying to stay relevant, pivoting as most spaces and artists and arts professionals have had to do, very much creating the virtual online access and video tours. We're really lucky. We have a great, very dedicated executive director here, Karen, who made sure to secure funding for the PPP grants, loans, and all of that, so that we never had to take any sort of deferment in terms of pay during the shutdown. We were able to keep working behind the scenes. And a lot of her efforts, not just fund the goings on here generally, but funded really great projects like an art kit project for elementary school students here in the district, where we produced just about 2,000 kits with watercolors, color pencils, craft supplies, and we're able to put them into individual bags and deliver those to the schools for distribution for kids who were stuck at home and didn't have access to art materials. So just kind of trying to be a part of the community while staying safe, I think, has really been at the forefront of our interests in this kind of new normal world that we're all sort of dealing with, which will hopefully be over soon. I want to get my shot.
Yes. Yes.
So anyway, that's a bit about that. I had to gush a little bit because I'm so fortunate to work with some really, really supportive individuals who, you know, care a lot about what it is that we do here. So I definitely wanted to take that moment. But going forward, so all that stuff, it feels like it was forever ago. You know, we've had a bit of time. All this new stuff. I feel like, I don't know, taking it slow for sure. I definitely am not producing work as quickly. I'm working a full-time job in a curatorial capacity. But the job came with a studio space. It's a really neat little room. It's actually in an old bathroom here in this old 1930s high school, which is purportedly hosted, oh, what's his name? Oh gosh, Jasper Johns. Who also, I love his work. I totally don't know why I blanked on his name, but supposedly he went here. I like to think maybe he went to the bathroom in my studio. That would be amazing. I would absolutely, I'll take it. And so, yeah, going back into the spinning and the weaving, having done those other quilted pieces with the woven bindings, I really wanted to see what it would look like just to do an entire piece out of these strips. I love spinning. I have so much, I had so much yarn to use, and this was a great way to use it up. I'm also, now that I'm in South Carolina, learning about seasons. Coming from Florida and the Bahamas, like, I didn't realize it actually does like get cold for like months at a time, and the trees lose their leaves, and basically you just want to stay inside and not go anywhere because it's dark and gray and cold and miserable. So I feel like I've really been working almost in seasons lately. So I stay inside all fall and winter. I spin yarn. And then so this all came out of kind of one of my first springs here in South Carolina, where it seemed like overnight, every tree and bush and plant exploded with leaves and colorful flowers. And it just came out of, I could tell, as far as I could tell, nowhere. I couldn't believe it. I was shocked that they weren't all dead. Like I said, I was not used to seasons. So the colors here, they're sort of arbitrary in a way. I love fauvism, fauve color choices and things like that. But also they do sort of reference a lot of the azaleas and the daffodils and the very springtimey kind of floral colors. I also dyed these with vinegar and food dye, so it had a very Easter egg kind of component to it, which again, I love the seasonality of that. But it wasn't, and also I loosely refer to this piece as Penelope, after the wife of Odysseus. She was again, historic fiber artist or mythological fiber artist. She would weave a tapestry all day and then take it apart at night, so that she could tell her suitors that, you know, I'll make a decision about who I'm going to marry when the tapestry is done, as a way of sort of buying time while her husband was away at war. He came back. So I keep taking this piece apart and reimagining it every time my partner, who lives with me part of the time, goes down to Florida or out to Colorado on a trip. I sort of go back into this as a way of, I don't know, just biding time, staying busy. And so I wanted to see what it would look like with a bunch of zippers in it. I was like, all right, this is cool, whatever. It's not doing it for me. So I had all these zippers from a thrift store. I thought, you know, let me try something. And I loved it. I literally, I died when you'll see what comes next. I don't know if it's as exciting for anybody else but me, but I just love the way that this entire piece of fabric that I've made out of all these individual strips can come apart, be reshaped, and then completely fall into absolutely nothing, a complete tangle. So this has been so much fun. You can wear it, you can like unzip a couple holes, put your arms through like a coat, you can make like a poncho out of it. So for me, I don't know, I probably will never finish this piece. I don't know if I should at this point, but it has been a fantastic bridge to sort of where I'm going or what I want to explore next. So going sort of larger scale with some of this, excuse me, there's a phone ringing. Apologies, that's office. So just going larger scale with these woven strips, I wanted to include a few of the details here because again, I love blending the colors of yarn or dyeing them. For me, it feels very painterly, like mixing a color. I also love plying the yarn, the interplay of a solid color versus sort of a mottled. And getting into patterns, I love these triangles here, leaving large holes and gaps in some of the weavings, adding appendages. So it's kind of ongoing. A few of these were done during lockdown. I rehabbed an old loom that we have up here at the gallery that had not been used probably about 30 years. It was covered in dust. It still had its inventory sticker from the South Carolina Department of Mental Health. So I feel like it definitely provided me with a little bit of mental health during the shutdown. But yeah, just taking this further, more, I think that's kind of the way I'm going. I'm very inspired by a lot of Bauhaus textile designers. I really love the work of Audie Berger, who unfortunately, she was killed by the Nazis in Auschwitz, but had made amazing textile works with the Bauhaus. I just love the patterns, the colors, the texture, the repetition of all these forms. Just, to me, I can't get enough of that. I also really love the work of Agnes Martin. There's something just so poetic and beautiful about these meditative, repetitive processes that she would find herself engaged in. Also very much drawing on the kind of Agnes Martin narrative. I love the story of her relocation away from a major art center in New York City to the deserts of New Mexico and finding inspiration there. I feel like I'm very inspired by having moved to a sort of a very different culturally, geologically kind of place. I travel a lot for work. I drive around to pick up the art to bring it back here. I've had the luxury of, until before COVID, of being able to travel regionally. And so just responding to, not everywhere is flat like Florida. Like you can drive through mountains and you can see like sheer cliff faces and look at all the sides of the rocks and the way it all came together. So these, for me, the weavings really take their inspiration from geological strata, from core samples. I just love this like layering, this building, this accumulating of information, of material, of texture, slowly over time. It, to me, feels very geological. And then also revisiting the Kobold project, the Blue Boys. I was invited to participate in a group show in Charleston in 2018, and still had all the sort of infrastructure for that project. I had the molds, I had the clay. And so basically at this point, I'm just making them until the mold falls apart. So the owl-headed figure there in blue is the piece that I created for the exhibition, but it's really the kind of thing that just has snowballed and carries on. And I have another statement about that because I've shown it, so I've written on it, so I feel like I've got all the good info. So I'll just get into that really quick. European art history and middle-class domestic kitsch canon into each other via invocations of Thomas Gainsborough's The Blue Boy from 1770, manifested in press-molded ceramic figurines mounted directly onto the wall in a direct occupation of architectural space. The Blue Boy, with his eternally youthful, feminized features, has frequently been deployed as an iconic signifier of gay subculture. Cast from second-hand store-found original, variations on this appropriated theme realize material corporeality in porcelain, terracotta, stoneware, and amalgams of other concocted bodies. The surfaces of the individual are varied by interventions with nails, ceramic shards, latex, salt, and glazes in an act of erasure and activation. Both singular and specific, the figurine's original identity is becoming recontextualized. These hybridized forms seek to embody liminality and absence as the mold breaks down with each subsequent casting, speaking directly to the flux and fluidity within creolized cultural spaces, as well as to queer bodies in space. And so that's kind of ongoing, playing around with different finishes, different materials. They're really getting into this, again, very geological kind of rock-like space. So I wanted to include some details of a few favorites that I've done lately. Also inspired by a lot of ancient and prehistoric art, votive figurines, hybridized spiritual or mythological representations. And then I feel like you cannot make ceramics in the South without encountering the convention of the face jug. So these all happened probably in the last couple of years. With the previous administration, I felt a lot like, oh, you know, cutting people's heads off, very French Revolution kind of thing. That's where the makeup faces come through and these sort of drowned figures. So yeah, very much the Edgefields pottery. Gauguin in the middle here has also done his own take on the face jug, so it's very much a convention. But also I love the Toby jug form from England and Staffordshire pottery and things like that. So very much referencing a lot of that kind of thing. Another project, back to the dyeing with paint. These are linen tea towels that I've had for years. I've got like tens and like so many of these things, use them till they're full of holes. And now it's like an oil on linen painting. I don't know what's going to happen here. We'll see. Also making large scale inflatable whale, dolphin pieces. Again, not sure what's going to happen with this. It's just one of those work in process pieces. Inspired by having witnessed beached whales growing up in the Bahamas, where they've done a lot of sonar testing that damages their ability to perceive their surroundings. They find them beached on you know, along the coast of the island there. So really responding to that, you know, being just kind of horrified and disgusted by a lot of that, but also realizing that in this new era of climate change, the climate crisis that we're all dealing with, you know, environmental issues are really kind of at the forefront, at least of my forward thinking. And all the tarps came from a really old project that I had done back in 2014 in grad school with these light box tarp quilts, an overhead quilt installation at Dimensions Variable as a group show Fathoms that I was in. And this was like a 30-foot by 40-foot overhanging quilt top patchwork that was backlit, had fans behind it. And so it was undulating slowly. It created these beautiful wave shadows on the wall, you know, which was great for the show. But then I had all these tarps. So I thought, cut them up. I don't know how to sew from a pattern. I taught myself to do that to create the whales, and just kind of hacked a vacuum cleaner to blow them up. So we'll see what happens there. I don't know. And lately, because I've had to stay home, I have been making rag rugs. It's something I always wanted to do. I love them. And I also had a ton of rags left over from all of my fabric projects, my quilting projects. So these are, they have been gifts. They have been, you know, from my own home. But I just love the way that they are able to, in a way, chart or navigate, map these domestic interior spaces. There's something really interesting about that for me. It's the process. I love it's slow, repetitive, very meditative. So hearkening back to other works that I've done. And I like that they're always changing and they can always grow. You can always revisit them and keep going. So on the left was kind of the first incarnation. And then I realized, oh, I can make shapes and change color and add little bumps places. So this one it's in my kitchen now. It's on the floor. I'm probably going to take it up in a couple days and keep going. That's my cat. And I just really, for me, here's the current one that I'm working on as well. It's got holes in it now. I like the idea of a rug that will trip you, slow you down. I'm going to probably embed some rocks and some shells in there. That was inspired just generally by my first like sort of big outing to the beach, just to like put my feet in the sand. It felt like a safe place. And I just feel like I did not expect to be so overwhelmed by how much I had missed the experience of being outside, of having kind of, I don't know, a sensory experience after lockdown, after being inside the whole time. It was something that, I don't know, I was moved by it in a way I didn't expect. But again, I love the, again, that slow meditative process, the dendrochronology, the tree rings. I love the work of Alma Thomas. It really reminds me a lot of what I'm seeing in these rugs. And so, yeah, I'm probably going to go 3D with these things. They're easy to sort of make into baskets, and I've done that before. So I'll probably go ahead and, I don't know, get sculptural with these. I'm not sure, but I'm very excited to just have a direction, have a trajectory, because that's been, the inability to like plan or, you know, even know what's going to be happening 2 weeks from now. I feel like we're getting some of that back now. I feel like I can recommit myself to a lot of these processes, these practices. So yes, and I think that's it. So thank you so much.
Cole, that was amazing. That was really amazing. Thank you for sharing all of that. I have a lot of questions and comments for you, so hold on.
Okay.
First one, let's see. Curious as to how the pattern of the witch was applied with cured wax.
Sure. So that was just a batik stamp. I basically just took upholstery foam like you would get in a couch. I traced the shape out that I wanted, and then I just came in with a razor bladed X-Acto knife, and basically just made a foam stamp that I was then able to dip in hot wax and then press right into the fabric. So very much stamped on, not free. I'm not a freehand kind of person. I'm not a painter. Yeah, stamps are the way to go.
I love the symbolism of what you described about the witch, and I also liked that you write a lot about your work. I think that's your curatorial side coming in, because a lot of artists don't write, but I like that you're very good. You write about everything, it seems like.
I think that's always been kind of at the forefront of my practice. If you open my sketchbook, it's mostly writing.
Really?
I'm very much an ideas person before they actually ever take form. So you see a lot of concept coming through before the actual execution, I think. But that was probably going back to like before I even majored in art in undergrad. I had started as an English major, and then I just like,
Oh.
I don't like reading as much.
Well, Alpesh Patel would be very happy to hear that from you. I don't know if you did take Alpesh, correct?
Oh,
Yeah, I know he's really pushes that we need to write more. Pip wants to say just she loves everything.
I love Pip.
Particularly the weavings you did with the zippers, the ones that you can just take, those are just.
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh. I fully had
What are
like,
you calling them? Do they have a name or a title yet, or you're still?
yeah, that whole project to me is just called Penelope after
Oh, it's
Odysseus's wife. But the zippers are, that's a thank you, Barnett Newman, and your ridiculous
Penelope.
paintings. Like, that's my take on it. This idea of this like upward spirituality, this like uplifting moment, or the void, the thing that opens up into something else. Yeah, oh, I'm so excited about that project.
It's very, very cool. Yes. Let's see here. Based on the work I've seen by Cole Miller during this presentation, I can see a lot of art pieces have similar patterns, particularly the lines and squares with different colors. Can you please ask why he finds that specific pattern interesting? How did you come up with that?
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, I feel like I didn't come up with any of that. Most of it is responding to a history of quilting, which is always done in blocks or geometric patterns, to textile design, which, because of the limitations historically of weaving, usually had to be somewhat geometric as well, tapestries and things like that. It's really building on those forms, being inspired by them, and then replicating them further and taking that, in my own direction, I think.
I think it's interesting. You said you can't follow a pattern, but you're teaching yourself to, but because quilt making generally is you have to follow unless you're doing the intuitive or the improvising, but it's very pattern and you've got to get those points, right? But yours aren't like that.
No, a lot of my quilts are more free form. So they'll just be scraps of fabric sewn together until they start to make some kind of a regular shape. But yeah, no, quilts at least are easy because they're flat. Sewing anything like three-dimensional, especially from a pattern, that's my hang up currently.
Right. And then of course, which I agree, those Toby jugs are really amazing. And you have an invitation to go up to a museum in Chicago to show them, the tobyjugmuseum.com. So you have an invitation. So I'll have to send you that email.
Oh,
So,
excellent. Yes,
yeah,
please.
yeah, that sounds really great. Those look wonderful. Another about making the rag rugs. Pip is mentioning she has one of her fiber classes. So I really like what you're doing about the rug that makes you trip, or you going to the beach, the experiences of experience the beach. And let's see, you have pieces that look like scarves and then the square patterns in different colors also in Dinosaur. Can you see it on the right corner? I don't know what that means. He has pieces.
Oh, Are you talking about
Oh,
this?
right. Oh, behind you.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, this is just one of the just another found quilt remnant piece. So it's one that hasn't made its way yet into the indigo vat. It's but very much a part of that material in that process.
So a lot of you find, can you share about where you find your quilts and how you, yep, your material?
Absolutely. Well, I tell you that I started that project in 2014, and it has gotten a lot harder to find them since. Back then, any sort of maybe not thrift stores in Florida, but I had friends living in South Carolina, actually unrelated to what I'm doing here now, that I had been visiting. I found a lot visiting them at various antique stores, sort of barns that people had just filled up with junk and called an antique store. But eBay had a lot too. But it seems like a lot of the scrapbookers have sort of taken it upon themselves to get everything they can off of eBay. So now they're a lot fewer and far between, but it makes it a lot more special. But it's the constant looking, asking people, because you find it's a great way to start a conversation. If people have a quilt, they usually have a story to go with it and want to talk about that.
Yes, yes. Well, it is 6:30. We are out of time. It was so wonderful to hear more about. I knew a little bit about your practice because we worked together a long time ago, but we haven't been in touch. So it was great to see you again. You look wonderful with long hair. I think you should keep it. I know it's pandemic hair. But I would like to invite everyone to unmute, to say hi. Let me see if I can unmute. If you would like to unmute yourself, I know there's a lot of people probably here I think Pip's on, and a few people that you know here. So
Lorna. Hi, Lorna.
Hi.
Hi, Lorna.
Cool. That was beautiful. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Lorna's rug that I sent her was actually in the presentation. So the square one, or the rectangle one, that's her kitchen.
Oh, okay. Wonderful. So I give you some virtual applause. Thank you again, Cole. And
Thank you.
I want to share it with everyone. Cole and I are going to be collaborating on an exhibition soon. Just a shout out to let you know it's coming up. And then we're not going to have any art talks for a few weeks because we're having finals, but in the summer semester, we're going to start up again. So just stay tuned for everyone. And Cole, I have to say, I loved having you be my last talk for this session because it was just wonderful. Really was.
Thank you. I'm very much looking forward to our collaboration. This has been such a sort of a fruitful interaction. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
I think so too. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us and have a great evening. And we'll see you soon.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.